It's my pleasure to introduce Byron Fanning, who's the Director of Parks, Open Space, and Cultural Arts at Adams County. And I have seen this presentation before, and it's such a good demonstration of what it takes to be a project champion throughout all phases of a project, which is what we really need. So please welcome Byron Fanning.
Thank you, Holly, and I am very honored and privileged to be with you here today, to see so many faces that I recognize and so many friends and partners that I've worked with over the years. I've not been at Adams County for very long. I've only been there 5 years, but I've met so many of you and worked with you. I'm just really happy to be able to share this project with you today. I thought the presentations so far today have been great. This is my first time at this conference, and I'm really enjoying it, so I won't be missing it again. And also wanted to say that I thought that the presentation inspired me right before lunch to kind of bring my inner Barbara to this presentation for you today. And I think it's right along the lines of the way she worked, so hopefully you'll see some of the similarities. But I'm here to kind of go a little bit more narrow than Jesse's presentation was and talk about one project in particular, and that's the Veterans Memorial at Adams County that I was privileged to be a part of. Press hard, right, Jesse? So just to kind of outline the problem, and maybe you have dealt with similar problems, but this was essentially the situation when I first arrived at Adams County 5 years ago. And if you're a parks director or a director of a department or CEO of your company or your firm, you may have encountered similar issues. We had projects that were languishing uncompleted. There was an awful lot of backlog and things just not getting done. Our OAC meetings were ineffective. We did not follow up well with our contractors and our consultants. Ultimately, that led to money not getting spent. And additionally, that led to angry politicians, and worse, the residents were not getting the amenities that they were promised, that they had heard about in public meetings, and that they really deserved throughout our park system. At the end of the day, there was no champion for that project. You had a lot of people kind of pointing at each other when I tried to kind of dig in and find out why some of these projects were lagging so far behind. We had parks projects that were taking 3 years that should have been done in 8 months. So from the beginning, it's my belief that a successful project needs a champion, as we've talked about quite a bit today. Someone who owns the project and wants to see it successful and wants to push it all the way to the end. Who cultivates a spirit of partnership amongst the team across many disciplines, whether it's designers, engineers, planners, staff, whomever comes together to be a part of the project, someone's got to drive it and bring that momentum. A strong focus on accountability in order to get things done and make sure that we're meeting budget and we're meeting schedule. And ultimately, somebody who solves problems but inspires the team. If there's not somebody there that is kind of working the background to make sure that everybody's keeping things on track, then we're in trouble. And oftentimes, it takes multiple champions to make a project go. So the first project I got to work on when I got to Adams County 5 years ago that was a new project was our Veterans Memorial. It had been kicked around from department to department. There were several project managers that had worked on it, and it kind of had gotten nowhere. No one really believed in it or wanted it to happen, and so the can kept getting kicked down the road. I was assigned to it, and the project manager was actually in a different department than mine. I was assigned, or I took interest because it was happening in my park. And the project manager was actually in another department, facilities, and her name is Cindy Stringham. And I know she's worked with some of you that are here today, but she's an excellent project manager, and really it took the two of us, I think, working together to make the project happen. We also were able to connect with a great design partner in DHM and Mark Wilcox, a firm that really brings some creativity to parks projects, which was exactly what this project needed. And what I do at the beginning of all the projects that we start in our department is I kind of level set and set the expectations and set the bar. So for this particular project, like I've done on several others, I brought the group together that had been assembled as a design team and essentially said, I want you to dream big. Let's not just do a run-of-the-mill bronze statue or a plaque in the park like we see in so many municipalities. I want to build the best possible Veterans Memorial, and let's do something that no one really west of Washington, D.C. has done. And that's what we set out to do from the very beginning. So from the beginning, we knew the bar was essentially high, and we had a strong vision for the project. So with that, the group kind of set about and started to brainstorm and started to think about ideas and what could we do. And again, at this point, just a small design team. But we had an epiphany as we were really working through what could we do. We thought, wow, couldn't we build a ship? We have a lake that we're working with. Water kind of lends itself to a boat, so why don't we build a ship? And is there a way we could do something where the bow of the ship would jet out into the lake and we could have a fishing pier, and it would be a great parks amenity in addition to really being something to recognize our veterans? And so we said, all right, well, somebody, look on your computer and see, is there a USS Colorado? We weren't aware at the time. And someone looked it up and said, yes, but it's a submarine. And so at that time, if we would have been smart, we maybe would have just put a periscope in the lake and been done and saved the county about $12 to $13 million. But no, we had to have vision. But we continued on with the project, and we found when we researched further, there was actually a USS Colorado battleship from World War II, and it had a really unique story. It was built in the 1920s. It actually survived Pearl Harbor. It was not at Pearl Harbor. It was out for repairs when Pearl Harbor was attacked. And it was one of the few battleships in the fleet that made it all the way through the war. And so it had a great story and a long life. And so we were off and running at that point. We said, okay, that's what we're going to do. We're going to design the USS Colorado. And what we set out to do was design a third scale model of the USS Colorado. So now we needed to bring on a partner who could understand the engineering of actually building a battleship in a lake in Colorado. I know there's a lot of engineers and contractors out there. How many of you build ships? I don't see one hand. And that's about what we were dealing with. So we tapped Dan Belzer with OTAC, who's here today. He was our engineer. And then we went out to find the right firm, and we found ECI. So we were lucky enough to be able to work with Ian Metzda. He's here today as well. And Scott from ECI, and the two of them were incredible to work with. There was a lot of problems to be solved and a lot of issues to work through. But as we got the team together and we started to really have a direction to go, then as the champion, I had to dial out. As the director of the department, a lot of other projects that I needed to work on, I couldn't really pay all of my attention to this. So they really dug in, and you can see some of the work to develop the bow of the ship and to build the bow of the ship, which was incredible. Ran into many of the same problems that you do with long lead times for steel. And this is coming right out of the pandemic. A lot of challenges just getting materials to work with. But things were on track, and we were in a pretty good place. Ultimately, this is what we built. It's not just a monument, although there are monuments to each branch of service included. Flags, there's a very innovative concrete wall where we used, we made impressions with rubber templates in actual concrete at different depths that gives the illusion of pictures, and I'll show a picture of that later in the presentation. But really some innovative approaches to this as we went through, as the team really was creative and dreamed big and came up with something really spectacular. But it wasn't easy. We ran into several challenges along the way, not the least of which was budget. So our original budget was $400,000. I gave the punchline earlier. We spent between $12 and $13 million. If anybody works for a government, going back and talking to the politicians to get them to increase a budget's hard. To get them to increase a budget from $400,000 to almost $13 million, that's really hard. So it was, there were quite a few presentations that needed to be given, but also we had a champion on the commission in Commissioner Chaz Tedesco, who really believed in this project from the very beginning, is passionate about it, a former veteran, and so he kind of pushed from the commissioner's side to help move this project forward. We ran into problems with schedule. If you remember 22 going into 23, significant amount of rain during that time. We had way more weather days than we had budgeted, and I thought we budgeted quite a few weather days because we were going over winter, but it didn't matter. We were shut down quite a bit. And so there was a moment where, and at different points in time, so as I had to ask for money, I had to dial back into the project and get back into the weeds. And then there were times like with the weather situation, we were kind of moving toward, we had promised the board that we were going to open Memorial Day, come hell or high water. And there was some high water, so that was a problem in that lake. We almost sank the boat at one point. But they built an unsinkable boat, so it's pretty good. But the thing was, we didn't think we were going to make our deadline. We were thinking about pushing the opening to July 4th, but that just wasn't going to be acceptable. We had promised the public and we had promised the commissioners that we were going to open on Memorial Day. So, you know, to take some notes this morning from Laura, you know, I went and kind of wiggled the cord a little bit, and had a frank conversation with Ian and his team to say, what can we do? Can we help? Can my staff do some of the plantings? Can we do some of the landscaping around the project? Can we pay you more? Can you have overtime? Can you work longer shifts? Can you work weekends? What can we do? And so we had a sincere conversation about it. And the partnership that we had with ECI was so much so that ECI came to the table and said, we'll work with you. We'll do whatever we needed to do. So a combination of those solutions got us to the deadline, and we did our grand opening on Memorial Day, which was incredible. So at the end of the day, the actions of a champion, and I know that Jesse touched on some of this in his presentation, but influence. So for one, the ability to have some of those tough conversations, to build up the relationships, to deliver on your end so that you can ask some of those hard things, but then ultimately to get the results that you're looking for. To be forward-looking. What's the big picture? How can we really make something happen? And in my case, really make a difference in the community. Same with so many of the projects that you saw that the district is involved with, really making an impact on the community. It's such a driver. Promote curiosity. Make sure that questions are being asked. We're not afraid to ask the questions. We're not afraid to push a little bit. Get creative and find a creative solution or a creative way to move forward. And be a problem solver. Make sure that as we're running into these things, we need to take them head on and not be afraid to deal with it either way. Last but not least is accountability, and that is making sure that we're meeting the expectations. So we created a great team. We got along really well, but there do come those times where you have to have some of those tough conversations and say, hey, you know, what do we need to do to make this happen? And they're less tough when you build a strong relationship amongst the team. So again, I was not the project manager. I did not drive the entire project, but I dialed in when I had to as a project champion. And I'm really proud of the national award-winning project that we ended up with. And if you get the opportunity, please stop by. If you're a veteran, it's something you can't miss. The real proof is in the pudding to me. One, we had to expand the parking lot in the last 3 weeks because there's so much visitation at that Veterans Memorial. It's unbelievable. And two, when you walk the Veterans Memorial and you see several veterans or families of veterans or people whose dad or whose relative was a veteran or spouse, really enjoying the memorial, but more important, kind of taking a somber moment and having a good thought or a good memory, and then when they thank you for what you did and tell you how much of a difference it makes to them and what it means to them and to their families, that makes all the difference in the world. So I thank you for your time today. It's been great. Thank you very much for having me.